Hi, I'm Gretchen Spiker with the City of Topeka.
And I'm India Yarborough with the Greater Topeka Partnership.
The Topeka Talk podcast is back for Season 2 for more meaningful community conversations.
We've got a great lineup in store, and we're excited to have you along for the ride this season. Before getting into the show, we'd like to highlight our first ever Topeka Partnership podcast sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Compass Marketing and Advertising Partners. Compass Marketing and Advertising takes their clients through the entire marketing process, from defining a client's business strategy to designing their message in all formats to delivering that message to their target markets. For an agency that partners with your business to navigate new territory and chart paths to success, connect with Compass Marketing and Advertising Partners at weareyourcompass.com. Thank you, Compass, for supporting the Greater Topeka Partnership and Topeka Talk podcast. Now back to the show.
Before we get into today's episode, we do want our listeners to know that we're going to be talking about some heavy and important topics today, including mental health, suicide, and self-harm. We'll be sharing resources in this episode and also want to bring attention to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you or someone you know needs help, just call or text 988. We hope you'll keep listening for this great community conversation.
Welcome back to Topeka Talk listeners for our final episode of the year. We're rounding out Season 2 with our third and final episode on those once-in-a-lifetime ARPA funds we've been talking about over the past couple episodes.
If you missed the October and November shows, definitely go back and give them a listen. We've had impactful conversations about the City of Topeka's overall process of distributing $10 million in ARPA funding, and we've taken a look at some major projects related to childcare and housing. Both of these important topics emerged as themes during the ARPA funding allocation process and are, of course, front of mind in many community strategies and conversations.
That's right. And today we're talking about another important issue, mental health. Joining us in the studio is Pam Evans, Director of Marketing and Development for the Family Service and Guidance Center. Family Service and Guidance Center is a regional leader and innovator in children's mental health. They specialize in providing top-quality mental health care services to more than 10,000 children, teens, and families from more than 30 Kansas counties each year.
Welcome, Pam, and thanks so much for joining us on the Topeka Talk podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Well, Pam, before we get to the incredible project that ARPA dollars helped fund, we really wanted to dive into the work you all do at Family Service and Guidance Center. We understand you provide some direct counseling services, education and outreach to, like I just said, thousands of Northeast Kansas kids and families. Give us a little more insight on what that work looks like. Take us through some of the programming and the impact it ends up having.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. I think a lot of times people think counseling, therapy, laying on a couch and telling your feelings. How are you feeling today? With kids, it's so different. Kids learn through play. And a lot of the work, a lot of the therapy sessions might happen in places you might not think. Kids tend to open up when they're playing, when they're enjoying activities like, swinging on the swing set, getting outside. A lot of times I'll look out the back area and see clients with their providers fishing at our pond, or that's when they can have open, honest conversations about the challenges that they're facing. So it's really unique in treating kids and their families. The process is a lot different than people might think. As far as you asked about the programming, I could talk for days, and I know we don't have days. So I'm just going to hit on a few of the highlights. Anxiety with coming out of COVID pandemic, anxiety is sky high, I think, in everyone. It especially is showing up in kids, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we've had an amazing anxiety treatment program that specializes in teaching the kids that they can conquer their fears. See a lot of social anxiety, a lot of phobias, fear of flying, fear of storms. And we have unique ways to treat those challenges by just gradually exposing them to their fears and teaching them they can overcome those fears and how to handle coping, working through that. So that is one unique program some people don't know about.
I'm so glad you mentioned the fishing and those examples. I feel like you painted such a picture in my head of what that looks like. And truly, I am one of those people who was not aware of just how deeply you are connecting with kids and meeting them where they're at. I think that's so important and very cool that you've found some unique ways to do that.
Yeah, and it sounds like in these very kind of organic settings, right, that make them feel seen and comfortable and, willing to open up in that way. So that's incredible.
Yeah, a lot of times our clients just need someone outside of the family to confide in, to trust, to know that someone else cares about them and wants to help them get better. And that's a lot of times what we hear the stories, from the parents afterwards. So that it's a really unique program. And it's with the anxiety treatment program, that's a short treatment period. It's like 4 to 6 months to complete treatment. So that's unique. And we have a lot of staff members working in Shawnee County schools, particularly in the 501 school district, but also Auburn, Washburn, and Shawnee Heights, where we have been able to reach a lot of kids and families through therapy services and case management services who are slipping through the cracks. That's been happening over the past 4 years, and amazing results there.
Yeah, that's such important work. And Pam, as you know, FSGC received $500,000 in ARPA funding for your new Youth and Crisis Recovery Center, which, very exciting, opened its doors in October. So for those who may not know about the center, are you able to give us a virtual audio tour of the space and what it offers?
This is such a great question. Oh, my goodness. That's a challenging question, but I got you.
You got this. Yeah. You did it so well in the first question, so I'm sure you've got this. Walk us through.
Yeah. So it is a 2-story building that we built right on our campus just east of 6th and Gage. Over 24,000 square feet, and includes 24 treatment beds. So, okay, virtual tour. Here we go. First floor, when you walk in, the reception area is warm and welcoming. One thing that we took a lot of time, spent a lot of effort in making sure that the overall environment throughout the building was welcoming, not sterile, not scary, not white walls. So there's lots of warm blues and greens and woodwork kind of throughout the building. As you walk in through the doors to go back to the treatment area and meeting areas, there are some kind of casual gathering areas and then a couple of enclosed spaces with comfy chairs that are really good for visitors when the family comes in.
Yeah.
To meet with the therapists and case managers and their children. So that's really important for us to, as we kind of go through really quick, the different settings and just space, making sure that was there. On the first floor, that's where most of the clinicians' offices are. We also have a boardroom, a laundry room, very important, might, not be top of mind, but with 24 beds, we're changing linens every day. We're doing a lot of laundry.
Yeah, I bet.
As you can imagine. And on the first floor, we have one of the wings for clients. There are 8 beds and 4 bathrooms, lots of storage areas, and a calming room. For kids, a lot of times the kids will ask to go into that calming room if they just want a quiet place to be. Okay. Not necessarily what you think of as if a kid is escalated, you go to the calming room. We try to keep that from happening.
This is a positive, right?
It is
huge to,
exactly.
Yeah, and it's kind of preventative in a way, it sounds like, from kind of getting to that peak point of crisis.
Exactly. And, the walls are super padded and just safe. Safety was a huge thing when we were designing this building. All the furniture is weighted. All of the glass is shatter resistant. The drywall reinforced, because when kids get escalated, especially teens, larger kids, holes go into walls.
Yeah.
Things get thrown. And the chairs, they'll be able to move them, but it's going to take a lot. 150 pounds of sand in a lot of the chairs.
Wow. No, and sorry if I interrupted your...
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Well, I was going to ask too, and maybe this is a part of what you're about to go into, but what type of individual is kind of coming to you for help at this center? What does that look like?
Yeah. So there are two different programs really that will be running out of this center. The one that's up and running right now are crisis services. So when you think of crisis, it's always self-defined, but it could be a child or teen who is thinking about taking their own life, potentially harming others, or just in a completely out of control state of mind.
And is this kids and teens 18 and under? What's the age range that you're serving here?
So we are serving between 5 and 17.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So big gap there.
Big gap. But the needs are so great and critical to have the ability and the facilities. And that's what the ARPA grant made possible for us.
And as you round out our tour, what's a quick overview of the second floor?
Second floor. There are 2 treatment wings upstairs, and those are the 2 crisis services wings. Same setup as down below, 8 beds, 4 bathrooms on each wing. The wing downstairs, that is not open yet, but that is for the treatment of kids who come in a mental health crisis and are dealing with substance use. So that is a service, that is a program like no other in the area.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, this really sounds like an amazing facility, and I'm sure it's going to do wonders for young people in our community that really are seeking that help. And to take us back to the kind of ARPA dollars part of the conversation here, we understand that this is about a $7.6 million project, and it was made possible by both private dollars and grant funding, which of course included those ARPA dollars. Did the $500,000 in ARPA funding help push this project over the edge? Talk to us a little bit about, how important that funding was in kind of making this project possible.
Absolutely. It was an incredible boost in our fundraising efforts, because without that $500,000, we would not have been able to readily have everything that we need, just the space and the specialized furniture and the ligature-proof everything, all of the bathroom fixtures, even down to the toilets, when they're so specialized for the safety of our clients and staff. Unfortunately, that comes at a high price.
Thought about that. Yeah,
it really does. It was an eye-opener for me. But, safety, and we're talking about our kids who are in the most escalated, toughest mental state.
You have to put that first, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The shower fixtures, the bathroom faucets, and I mentioned the windows and all that. All of those added up, the additional expenses. And again, the ARPA grant was absolutely key to making this vision a reality. We started planning on this well before COVID.
Yeah.
COVID hit, and we started seeing even more severe crises in our current clients and new folks calling crisis, and just kids were and are struggling.
So detail was spared in this facility. It's incredible. And also on that COVID point, Pam, in our last episode 2 conversation with Chris from Cornerstone, he was talking more broadly about housing and the cost increases that came as a result of COVID or subsequent effects of COVID. And did you guys see that as well, where initial project estimates for this facility increased because of some of those factors?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The initial pre-COVID, when we got the very first ballpark estimate, and we knew it was a ballpark estimate, but it was $6 million.
Yeah.
And then life happened. COVID happened. Yeah. Yeah.
Can't avoid that one, I guess.
No.
But great question, Gretchen.
And Pam, as we round out our conversation today, it has totally flown by. It's been great. We want to talk a bit more broadly about mental health. It is such an important issue. And as one of Topeka's mental health providers, we're hoping to gain some insight from you today. What are some of the challenges you all are seeing when it comes to mental health in our community? And how are you working to address those gaps and barriers as a service provider?
That is a great question. And like probably, I'm not going to say the majority, but so many other organizations in our community in Northeast Kansas and across the country, workforce is a huge challenge.
And that's just to bounce off of that. That's something we heard through our childcare discussions and our housing discussions too. So very relevant.
Yeah, it is. And as we see our needs grow, we knew we were going to have to get ahead of with the planning for this new building. We knew we were going to have to get ahead of that, making sure we built this great building. And yes, we had an existing building at 8th and Lane, but growing. We have an amazing team over there, and they said, we want to start a crisis services internship program. And this started a couple of years ago, worked with Washburn University and a lot of the area universities, and had a lot of great interest. And that program is going gangbusters. And the best thing that I can report is, anywhere between 50 and 60% of our interns have stayed.
That's great.
So they've, learned, they've developed relationships with our kids, and they want to continue helping kids and families heal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I imagine there's a real benefit to, having these youth services, but then having young people getting into the field at the same time. Is there something there more that you can talk about?
Yes, it really, we talked earlier about making those connections, developing those relationships. I think it sure doesn't hurt. I mean, there are lots of benefits of having younger staff members who can relate easier.
And that's kind of where I was going with that peer-to-peer almost connection.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's important. And, like I said earlier, if kids feel supported and feel comfortable sharing those deep thoughts, and maybe sometimes really scary thoughts, particularly in the kids that we treat at the Youth Crisis and Recovery Center, getting those out there and starting to work through, it's incredibly important.
It's a huge step, right?
Oh,
Treatment path. It's
absolutely.
Yeah, that's huge. Well, final question for you today, Pam. What is the one thing you want Topekans to know about mental health and the role Family Service and Guidance Center plays in that realm?
I would share, we know mental health challenges are very, very common, but very treatable, especially if they're addressed early in a person's life. I always encourage parents not to wait for the behavior or the mental health symptoms that they might be seeing. Don't wait for them to just get better, because a lot of times, unfortunately, they won't without seeking professional treatment. And we know making that phone call is really, really, really hard to do. But the earlier we can address those challenges, the more successful the kids will be. That's what the 270 plus staff members are here to provide for the kids. And, I want to stress too, the families. One thing with the Youth Crisis and Recovery Center, families have to be involved. That is, we've always had families involved, but we are enhancing that level of service and requirement, because if the family situation doesn't change, and if, we want to make sure the parents are understanding why their children might be feeling this way and how to react. So that's incredibly important. And one last thing, I know that was more than one.
Oh, you're totally fine. We want to hear all you today. So.
Yay, be careful what you ask for. I just want to make sure that parents, caregivers, and adults know that if they find their child or their teen in a mental health crisis, if they are threatening to take their own life or harm others, that mental health professionals are available right here in Topeka 24/7, 365. And to reach out to get those services, they can just call the main number, and it's 785-232-5005. Again, we have specially trained folks that can help them work through the problem, de-escalate the situation, and then assess what kind of services do we need to wrap around that family to prevent it from happening again. So,
well, Pam, this conversation was incredible, and just want to thank you for all the work you do, and thank you for joining us today. I mean, I'm sure we all know someone who has been impacted by mental health issues, suicide, and all the things we've discussed today. So thank you so much for your work and for this conversation.
No, thank you. It was great fun. Thanks, Pam. You bet.
Listeners, stick around for some closing thoughts with a special guest after this brief break.
We're now joined in the studio with Topeka City Councilwoman Christina Valdivia-Alcala. Councilwoman Valdivia-Alcala represents Topeka's District 2 on the City Council, and she was one of the committee members who, like Councilman Duncan, who you heard from in episode 1 of the series, reviewed and later approved the $10 million in ARPA funding that was allocated to community organizations.
Christina, welcome to the Topeka Talk podcast, and thank you for being here with us to wrap up Season 2 and our ARPA series.
Well, thank you for having me.
So glad you're here.
Yes, it's fun to finally see where it all happens at podcast bills.
Well, we try to keep it fun and fresh for sure. And we're so happy to have you kind of rounding out our discussion here. If you can believe it, that ARPA allocation process actually wrapped up more than a year ago, which I know has blown our minds. What do you remember most from that process? I know you were on the committee. I mean, looking back, what are some of your major takeaways?
Well, I first want to just say that it was a huge endeavor undertaken by Chair Duncan, by Councilwoman Nager, and myself. And I would say, having listened to Councilman Duncan's podcast, I think he really did an excellent job at giving the main points. If there's anything that I would want to say about the process is that agreeing with him on so many levels about how intentional it was and how really we were able to surpass anything that had ever been done in the Social Service Grants Committee, which happens annually, and really expand the scope of how we wanted to dig in and help Topeka with the intentions that the governing body had set, with the intentions that were set with the committee. We knew what we were looking for, and it was an intense process, but I believe in addition to what Councilman Duncan was talking about, we also helped in the realm of food deserts. We also helped in the realm of enhancing digital equity. We also helped with, purchases that would be able to provide more foodstuffs for communities, sections of communities that are suffering from not having enough food. And so looking at the $10 million and how it was spent, understanding that we're going to come back into this in January or February and taking a much broader look to make sure that all the monies are spent by the end of 2024. It's going to be exciting to see how all of this has unfurled and the benefits that we can see across the city as well.
And that's, a great segue. When we talked with Councilman Duncan, and as you heard from listening to the episode, he did mention that the allocation process, like you said, wasn't easy. Many organizations didn't get the full amount they requested. Compromises had to be made. The discussions were challenging and definitely required give and take. Talk to us about those hard conversations and compromises as you see them. And does that push and pull reflect on what it's like to serve on the governing body more broadly, or were there some unique elements to the ARPA process that were different?
I think that there were some unique elements. Obviously, if anybody keeps up with City Council, sometimes it can kind of get rough and tumble, or sometimes, it can appear that we've come to an impasse. Sometimes there is very heated debate, passionate debate. What we looked at here with the ARPA grant process, it really did to me feel like a sense of community was created during those months worth of time that we were together, when you could have such open dialogue. And to me, one of the most important elements was transparency. Not only that we had transparency in how, as Councilman Duncan was saying, this was put out, in public meeting form, televised, but also that all the information was put online so that people, average folks, had complete access to reviewing the applications, really honing in to see where those dollars would be going. So the transparency part, but the way in which people really shared what their vision of their particular projects were, and also that they were so willing to cut dollars because they knew that that $10 million was set in stone, period. And to see the community come forward in such a manner where they knew what was at stake, they knew what the needs were in the community, but they were also willing to be flexible, I would say is a huge, just huge accolades to what communities can do when they really set their minds to it.
Definitely. And it sounds like so many people were kind of at the table at different points, maybe for that conversation. Lots of different nonprofit folks who were seeking some of that funding. And I will say, earlier in this episode, we heard from Pam Evans with Family Service and Guidance Center, who spoke with us about the new Youth Crisis and Recovery Center, which was made possible in part by ARPA funding. And it's one of those projects that has kind of come to fruition, been completed now. So we're super excited about that. But, many of these ARPA funded projects are in the works. They might not be completed, but in the case with the center, it is, it's reached that finish line. Talk to us about how it feels for you and maybe the community at large. I don't know if you've kind of heard from certain individuals, but to see these projects coming together, what does that feel like, especially being on the committee that kind of made it happen?
I think that, and I will just be pretty honest in saying that I had been hoping that more than the $10 million out of the $45 million would go to the ARPA grants. Initially, there had been talk when we first started conversations about only $1 million, and that obviously caused my jaw to drop because we all know what the need is in Topeka. Then we had some dialogue about maybe $16 million, which I was very supportive of. But obviously, you have to take into account where the votes are going to be, and the votes came down for the $10 million. So to see this all taking place, I think that the governing body was relieved in having the process completed, knowing that it was well taken care of, tended to, and transparent within the committee process with Public or Policy and Finance Committee. And I think to me what this shows is, with this $10 million, is that community, we hear what the need is. We see what the need is. We have heard you. We see the stats in any number of studies that have been done. And we are taking those steps that are needed by rolling out these dollars and spreading it out as much as we can, as much as we did, to where it feels like to me that this is laying the groundwork, as Gretchen had posed, what might the next 5 to 10 years look like? Well, this is setting that foundation.
Mm-hmm. So if I hear you right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying, it's really great to see these projects come together, and it was great to be able to disseminate these funds, but we know that's not going to meet the need. So there's still work to do as a community to kind of fill that gap. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Absolutely. I mean, you hear all types of metaphors about the strength of the foundation, when something new is built, when some type of infrastructure is being built. These dollars were meant towards human infrastructure. And to understand that $10 million, for citizens to understand that $10 million was allocated to create what I believe is a strong foundation. Is it a complete foundation? No, because we know how many more dollars are needed. But for the city taking the lead on this with the help of the ARPA funding, and not just like Councilman Duncan said, just going into a room and saying, oh, here, this is going to go here, whatever. We listened to the people on this. We listened, we went over thoroughly, and now Topeka, here we are. Take a look at it, look at this foundation, and now setting our sights ahead, this is going to help lay the groundwork, because we need to keep moving. We can't stay still because the need is too great.
Definitely.
And as we kind of back up and look at this from the 50,000 view, as I like to say it, just how important and impactful are federal dollars to a community like Topeka and Shawnee County?
I don't think, especially at this point in time that we're at, coming out of, COVID, inflation, the skyrocketing cost of supplies, labor, etc. I don't think that we even have enough time to sit in this room and talk about how important federal dollars are, how important aggressive partnerships are, how the need for really aggressive grant writing, and the need for local governments, state governments to establish collaboration, so when they move up and ask for those federal dollars, the feds will see that those strong relationships are occurring.
It's a great point. Very foundational work I think you've been speaking to, one with the funds themselves, but also just how we look at bringing more federal dollars to the community. And
right.
It's gradual.
It is gradual. One of the things that we had been, concerned about, what happens when the money runs out.
Yeah.
And I recall hearing Councilman Duncan saying there wasn't a lot of emphasis that we were putting on pay increases, because what are you going to do after 2024 and that money runs out? So I think what this shows is the intersecting relationship with all of these different initiatives, and that need to develop that and formulate that plan as to how as a city, how as a county, how as, GTP, how do we, large businesses, how do we all come together and try to move forward to continue the work?
Definitely. Lots of partnerships involved in that sort of discussion, it sounds like. And more hands at the table can sometimes help make the work lighter, right? So that's really important. Well, before wrapping up our conversation today, we do want to circle back on those three kind of major themes we saw emerge through the ARPA process. Those themes, as we saw, were childcare, housing, and mental health. And they kind of served as the framework for this three-part podcast series. Christina, what are your hopes for these focus areas in the years to come? What kind of progress would you personally like to see our community make when it comes to childcare, housing, and mental health?
I think that first and foremost, we're going to have to understand that all of us have to get out of our silos and start working together. The city has to understand that asking itself critical questions about the way it does business with partners, or the way that partners do business with the city, these are times where we have to ask critical questions of ourselves if we're going to continue to do the best we can to serve community. One thing that Policy and Finance Committee is pushing through is supporting the need, absolutely, for a living wage. We cannot do that as a city. We are stopped from doing that because at the state level, and I had checked into that already, because we cannot keep on the way that we are going with the need that is in this city, not across the board, but in certain sections of our city. And so we put the legislative agenda together that the governing body will then approve. And one of those is the support of SB 140 at the state level, which is to give cities the right to enact a higher wage than what the federal wage is, which I think is $7.25 an hour still after all of these years. Well, again, we're talking partnerships. What we need to look at future-wise is how do municipalities work with their county delegations get on the same page, and then move forward when it comes time for these bills to move through at the state level. Oftentimes, these different types of entities, local, county, delegations, within a county, and then the state can feel very separate, very disconnected, but we can't afford to do that anymore. We have to come together. So that's one thing. And I would say probably the other main thing in my mind is that large corporations need to step up when it comes to the need for childcare, because healthy children that are taken care of are going to create a more productive workforce. You can pay your workers as much as you want, but if you have mothers and fathers, single parents that are worried about who is taking care of their child, and if they have enough money to pay for that daycare, then, you're hurting yourself in the long end. Profits, however you want to look at it. And a healthy workforce is a vibrant and productive workforce. And I think that would be too, really calling on our major corporations in and around Topeka to step up and make childcare a priority.
Well, and it really points to the value of everyone being on the same page and heading in the right direction, right? Because if you're disjointed and going in all these different directions with your efforts to, even if it's just try and solve the same problem, you're not going to make as much progress as you might when you're all on the same team.
Absolutely. And I always say we are an intimate city. We are.
Yeah.
We're really intimate. And so working to bring down silos, working to get on the same page, and we know that those are all rough kind of human elements to be in. But when we're looking at what we're trying to do for the city and how we're trying to raise that quality of life and the public health and safety for everyone, then it's like, okay, let's just calm it down and let's just try to come together. We're an intimate city. We should be able to do this.
Exactly. Thank you so much for those insights and for joining us today. What a great conversation it's been. Last question for you today. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners that we didn't touch on today that you'd like to share?
I would just say for those listening to get involved with your community, get involved with your neighborhoods, get involved with watching city council, get involved with reading the newspaper, just get involved, because a more involved and engaged community is a healthier community, and we all need to step up.
I could not agree with that more, and I think that's an amazing note to end this 3-episode series on. Christina, thank you so much for joining us today to share your thoughts. We really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
And to our listeners out there, as we wrap up season 2 with this episode, we want to thank you for tuning in this year for some important community conversations.
What a season it has been. We're already looking forward to season 3 coming your way in 2024, so be on the lookout.
Thanks for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.
You can catch new episodes of Topeka Talk Community Conversations the first week of each month.